Hello, I'm Rick Klima, Director of the Common Reading Program at Appalachian State University, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our event this evening with Dave Isay. Mr. Isay will be coming out here shortly and speaking, and it's my understanding that he wants to sprinkle in questions from the audience at various points during his prepared remarks. Even so, after his prepared remarks, if there's time, he can take more questions from the audience. So anyway, please feel free to go ahead and start getting your questions for Dave Isay ready. I'll also ask, if you came to hear Mr. Isay speak, that you please plan to stay through the question and answer time just to minimize disruptions during that time. After our question and answer time, we will take a short break so that Mr. Isay can catch his breath before he heads back to the lobby, where he'll be signing books for anyone who would like to stay. And these can be books that you brought with you or purchased in the lobby from the App State campus store, which has a table set up back there. The Common Reading Program at App State this year and every year for more than a quarter century has provided to all first-year and new transfer students a book, the Common Reading Book, with the expectation that this will serve to promote and guide intellectual, interdisciplinary discussions on the topic of the book among students and with faculty and other members of our community, both inside and outside the classroom. And App State's Common Reading Book for the 2025 through 2026 academic year is Dave Isay's Callings, the Purpose and Passion of Work. To introduce Mr. Isay, I'd like to welcome Jennifer Schaefer, Director of App State's Career Development Center, who is partnering with the Common Reading Program on this event. Jennifer?
Good evening. As Rick said, my name is Jennifer Schaefer, and I have the privilege of serving as Director of the Career Development Center here at Appalachian State University. When I learned that Callings had been chosen for our Common Reading Program, I was overjoyed. Every day, I support students as they discover their passions and purpose, and this book could not be more aligned with that journey. Like Storm Reyes, the library assistant whose story is featured in Callings, I devoured this book. I wanted to understand not only the stories themselves, but why Dave chose these voices out of the thousands captured through StoryCorps. I turned to his TED Talk and interviews, where he often reflected on the messages young people hear about work and the tension between chasing money and finding meaning. What struck me the most is the way Callings highlights people who rise each day with joy and love for what they do. Dreamers, healers, philosophers, groundbreakers. Their stories remind us that meaningful work is not only possible, but transformative. And that resonates deeply here at Appalachian State. Our students are drawn to this university because of their passions for sustainability, for justice, for community, and so much more. They want to make a difference. This book amplifies that spirit and offers a vision of work as calling, work that fuels purpose and impact. Callings is the most recent of Dave Isay's 8 books and the 5th that he's written for StoryCorps, a nonprofit oral history project whose mission is to preserve and share humanity's stories, build connections between people, and create a more just and compassionate world. Dave Isay founded StoryCorps in 2003 when he opened a recording booth in New York City's Grand Central Terminal, into which people could simply go and tell their story. And thousands did. A pair of mobile booths were launched 2 years later in converted Airstream trailers that traveled the country so that more people could tell their story. And tens and thousands did. Permanent booths followed in Atlanta, Chicago, and San Francisco. And then, using funding available after Dave Isay was awarded the TED Prize in 2015, StoryCorps developed an app so that anyone could tell their story anywhere, anytime. And all these stories, including new ones that come in every day, are preserved forever in the StoryCorps archive at the American Folklife Center in the U.S. Library of Congress. It's the largest single collection of human voices ever gathered. And they're not just preserved, but also shared through StoryCorps podcasts, animated shorts, digital platforms, and books. Millions of viewers have watched them on PBS. Millions more have heard them through StoryCorps' weekly broadcasts on NPR's Morning Edition. In addition to the 2015 TED Prize, Dave Isay's work has earned numerous other recognitions, including a Guggenheim Fellowship, a MacArthur Genius Grant, a Rockefeller Fellowship, 2 Excellence in Journalism Awards from the Kennedy Center for Justice and Human Rights, 2 more from the Hillman Foundation, and 6 Peabody Awards on whose board of directors he now serves. We could not be more excited to have him here with us and to hear from him this evening. So please join me in welcoming to this stage and to Appalachian State University, Dave Isay.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. I told, that was a beautiful introduction. I told Jennifer, just say, here's Dave. She didn't do that, but it was very, very lovely. And I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm thrilled that Callings was selected for the Common Read for App State. So who here has actually read Callings? Oh my God. You did your homework, and some of you maybe have already graduated, it looks like to me. And who here knows what StoryCorps is? And who here has no idea what StoryCorps is and are counting the minutes till they, yes. I love the honesty, thank you. So I'm gonna, Jennifer did a really good job of explaining the trajectory of StoryCorps. I'm gonna play a bunch of stories tonight. We're gonna have a conversation. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have. And we'll just, do some listening and some thinking about Callings and about this country. It is a little bit of a crazy time in the country with the assassination last week of Charlie Kirk, the divisions in the country. We're going to play some classic StoryCorps stories tonight, some Callings stories. And I have to warn you that I've chosen some heavy stories, but even in those, I hope you'll find some inspiration and be reminded of who we are at our best as Americans. So StoryCorps, as Jennifer said, very simple idea. You guys can hear me okay? Is volume's good? Everything's good? Okay. So very simple idea. We put a booth about 20 years ago. I had been a radio documentary producer for decades before starting StoryCorps, and was always interested in the public service use of radio more than entertainment, for better use and for better or worse, and had this kind of crazy idea 20 years ago. We put a booth in Grand Central Terminal where you can bring anyone who you want to honor and listen to their story, your mother, your grandmother, a friend. You come to this booth, you're met by a facilitator who works for StoryCorps, brings you inside, the door shuts, you're in a sacred space, complete silence, the lights are low, and you sit across from your grandma for 40 minutes and you ask questions and you listen. And I knew from doing radio documentaries that the microphone gives you the license to say things, to ask things you maybe have never talked about before. So from the beginning of StoryCorps, people thought of this as, if I had 40 minutes left to live, what would I say to this person who means so much to me? Everybody cries in the booth. At the end of the 40 minutes, you get a copy, and another one stays with us and goes to the Library of Congress so your great-great-great-grandkids can get to know your grandmother through her voice and story. And because of the nature of what happens in the booth, we're kind of collecting the wisdom of humanity. Every kind of topic you can imagine talked about in the booth. Now, In all honesty, at the beginning of StoryCorps, very unpopular. Nobody knew what the hell we were doing. Empty booth. We had one woman who came 200 times. I think maybe it was like 190 times. She would ride the subways and grab people off the subways and bring them to the booth and interview them. Eventually it got super popular and we had waiting lists. As Jennifer said, we launched these Airstream trailers that travel the country. But at first people didn't know what we were doing. And I'm going to take you back to the beginning of StoryCorps. This is one of those early interviews when the booth wasn't very busy, but it's a beautiful interview, I think. This is a kid named Joshua Lippman. This is probably the first or second week of StoryCorps. And again, these are 40-minute interviews. You're going to watch 3-minute excerpts from these interviews. This is Joshua Lippman, who is neurodivergent. At the time, it was called Asperger's syndrome. What he has, it's a form of autism where kids are super smart, very difficult time socially, often develop obsessions. In Josh's cases, you'll hear it's with animals. And he actually brought his mom to the booth to participate in StoryCorps. Now, we have lists of questions when you come to StoryCorps that people choose from, the 10 most popular questions and hundreds of other questions. And the facilitators who are there to guide you will say, you know, ask that question you've always wanted to ask. The 40 minutes goes by so fast. Josh wrote, as you'll hear, completely, like nothing off the list, one of the few people who never asked a best question. These are all Josh Lippman questions. You'll also hear that he has a British accent. One of the characteristics of Asperger's, apparently, is that he was born in London and moved to New York when he was, 8 months old, but kids with Asperger's have a very hard time losing their accent. So you'll notice a British accent, and you will hear Josh interviewing his mom. Again, Josh, who's has an obsession with animals, and has Asperger's syndrome, and asked his mom to come to StoryCorps year 1.
From a scale of 1 to 10, do you think your life would be different without animals?
I think it would be an 8 without animals because they add so much pleasure to life.
How else do you think your life would be different without them?
I could do without things like cockroaches and snakes.
Well, I'm okay with snakes as long as they're not venomous or can constrict you or anything.
Yeah, I'm not a big snake person.
But cockroach is just the insect we love to hate.
Yeah, it really is.
Have you ever felt like life is hopeless?
When I was a teenager, I was very depressed. And I think that can be quite common with teenagers who think a lot, and are perceptive.
Am I like that?
You were very much like that.
Do you have any mortal enemies?
I would say my worst enemy is sometimes myself, but I don't think I have any mortal enemies.
Have you ever lied to me?
I probably have, but I try not to lie to you, even though sometimes the questions you ask make me uncomfortable.
Like when we go on our walks, some of the questions I might ask.
Yeah, but you know what? I feel it's really special that you and I can have those kind of talks, even if sometimes I feel myself blushing a little bit.
Have you ever thought you couldn't cope with having a child?
I remember when you were a baby, you had really bad colic, so you would just cry and cry. And
What's
I didn't know
colic?
It's when you get this stomach ache and all you do is scream for like 4 hours
Even
a
louder
night.
than Amy does?
You were pretty loud, but Amy's was more high-pitched.
I think it feels like everyone seems to like Amy more, like she's like the perfect little angel.
Well, I can understand why you think that people like Amy more, and I'm not saying it's because of your Asperger's syndrome, but being friendly comes easily to Amy. Whereas I think for you, it's more difficult. But the people who take the time to get to know you love you so much.
Like Ben or Eric or Carlos.
Yeah, and
like I have better quality friends, but less quantity.
I wouldn't judge the quality, but I think...
I mean, like, first it was like Amy loved Claudia, then she hated Claudia, she loved Claudia, then she hated Claudia.
Part of that's a girl thing, honey. The important thing for you is that you have a few very good friends, and really that's what you need in life.
Did I turn out to be the son you wanted when I was born? Like, did I meet your expectations? And
you've exceeded my expectations, sweetie, because, sure, you have these fantasies of what your child's going to be like, but you have made me grow so much as a parent because you think...
Well, I was the one who made you a parent.
You were the one who made me a parent. That's a good point. But also because you think differently from, what they tell you in the parenting books.
Yeah.
I really had to learn to think out of the box with you. And it's made me much more creative as a parent and as a person. And I'll always thank you for that.
And that helped when Amy was born?
And that helped when Amy was born, but You are just so incredibly special to me. And I'm so lucky to have you as my son.
Okay, now especially freshmen, I want you to be thinking about questions because I'm going to play a few more stories and then open up to questions, okay? All right, let's just run through a few stories. This next one, so StoryCorps started, super unpopular, gets super popular. We're traveling around the country. This is just an example of one of the kind of beautiful, another parent-child interview happens in a booth. This one is in Jackson, Mississippi, and it's Albert Sykes and his son Aiden, who is a fourth grader, and we're just going to eavesdrop on their conversation. Again, remember, these are 40-minute conversations. We're going to hear 3 minutes of it. Albert and Aiden Sykes.
Do you remember what was going through your head when you first saw me?
I remember when the doctor pulled you out, the first thing I thought was that he was being too rough with you. And he actually held you like a little Sprite bottle, and he was like, "Here's your baby." That was the most proud moment of my life. Don't tell your brothers, because it's 3 of y'all. But it was like looking at a blank canvas and just imagining what you want the painting to look like at the end, but also knowing you can't control the paint strokes. You know, the fear was just, I gotta bring up a black boy in Mississippi, which is a tough place to bring up kids, period. But there are statistics that say black boys born after the year 2002 have a 1 in 3 chance of going to prison. And all 3 of my sons were born after the year 2002.
So, Dad, why do you take me to protest so much?
I think I take you for a bunch of reasons. One is that I want you to see what it looks like when people come together, but also that you understand that it's not just about people that are familiar to you, but it's about everybody. Did you know the work that Martin Luther King was doing was for everybody and it wasn't just for black people?
Yes, I understand that.
Yeah, so that's how you gotta think. If you decide that you wanna be a cab driver, then you gotta be the most impactful cab driver that you can possibly be.
Are you proud of me?
Of course. You my man. I just love everything about you, period.
The thing I love about you never gives up on me. That's one of the things I will always remember about my dad.
You said it like I'm on the way out of here, or like I'm already gone.
So, Dad, what are your dreams for me?
My dream is for you to live out your dreams. It's an old proverb that talks about when children are born, children come out with their fists closed because that's where they keep all their gifts. And as you grow, your hands learn to unfold because you're learning to release your gifts to the world. And so for the rest of your life, I want to see you live with your hands unfolded.
Live with your hands unfolded, right? That, I mean, when I talk about the wisdom of humanity, you can just hear it. You know, part of the idea of StoryCorps is the poetry and the grace and the wisdom and the beauty and the stories of just, I mean, there are no famous people who participate in StoryCorps. If they do participate in StoryCorps, they have to interview someone who's not famous. But there's all of this like beauty in these stories that are hiding in place all around us if we just take the time to listen to them. I'm going to play one more story and then we'll just start to kind of talk. But I've never done this before. But I'm going to ask, like, if you could describe the 2 stories you just heard, like one word, can someone just shout out like one word of what they heard? Anybody? Authenticity, great. Anything else? Heartwarming, good. This is a good row. What else do we have? What's that? Hopeful, yep. Human. Wise. I love this. We could do this the whole time. Anything else? Thank you, guys. Go ahead. What was that? Honest. Okay. We're going to do, thank you. Okay, so yeah, I think of this StoryCorps as kind of the opposite of reality TV. Nobody comes to StoryCorps with a loved one to get rich. Nobody comes to get famous. It's just this act of generosity and love. And you know, it's weird. One of the things we hear all the time from people about StoryCorps stories is that they make people cry. And most of them aren't sad, although I'm warning you, I'm going to play some sad stories tonight. But I think I think we're surrounded by so much kind of nonsense and BS. We're kind of in this reality distortion zone in this country, especially now, that when you hear someone just, all the words you just said, honest, authentic, when you hear someone, I would say, listening to those, I was thinking about this, like love is kind of an operative word here also, that when you hear people who are just speaking out of love with each other, in this world we're living in now, you're kind of walking on holy ground. And I think that's why, even with funny stories, people end up kind of choking up. So, okay, so this is a story from college. It's another parent-child interview. It's a guy named Will Smith, not the famous Will Smith, 1L, W-I-L Smith, and his daughter Olivia. And he wanted to tell her about his first days as a freshman at Bowdoin College in Maine. So let's watch Will and Olivia.
I wasn't planning on having you as my roommate. I actually thought that if Bowdoin College knew I had you, they wouldn't let me come to college. So I hadn't mentioned it to anyone. And I got a job working at Staples, cleaning at night. And I had to take you in with me at work sometimes and hide you in the closet. I think I lost something like 27 pounds just from stress and not eating because I didn't have enough for both of us. My basketball teammates were my first babysitters. I just remember coming from class and there were 4 giant guys and then there was this 18-month-old who was tearing up the room.
Were you ever embarrassed bringing me to class or just having me in general?
I felt a little awkward, but never embarrassed. There were times when the only way I could get through was to come in and look at you and see you sleeping and then go back to my studies. And my graduation day from Bowdoin is a day I'll never forget. All of my classmates, they stood up and gave me the only standing ovation.
I remember walking up with you and having my head in your shoulder.
Yeah, the dean called both of our names as he presented us with the diploma.
So technically I already graduated from college.
Nice try. The degree only has my name on it, so you still gotta go.
I really admire your strength, and I love you.
I draw my strength from you. I always have, and I still do.
So Will and Olivia did the conversation because, as it said, Will had just been diagnosed with cancer, and he wanted to have this chance to have an honest conversation with his daughter. And again, listening is an act of love to kind of show their love for each other by talking to each other. Rick and I were talking in the car about this. One of the things that you don't want to do. One of the lessons of StoryCorps is not to wait. I think it's really, the people who at StoryCorps, especially our communications people, is anybody a communications major here? No communications. Do you have a communications school?
There were a couple back.
Okay, good. Well, so the communications people at StoryCorps don't do this. They are completely right, because sometimes I'll say that everything about StoryCorps reminds you you're going to die, which is like the worst selling point ever for an organization. But, in many ways, this is about our mortality. In hospice, the people who work in hospice tell the people who are dying or who have a loved one who's dying that there are 4 things you want to say to that person before they die. Thank you, I love you, forgive me, I forgive you. And in many ways, that's kind of what's happening in StoryCorps booths across the country every day. It's a chance to say the really important things to the people who are most important to you. And, one of the lessons of StoryCorps is not to wait. And I think another lesson of StoryCorps, and are you guys coming up with questions? Because I'm about to open up for questions. And I'm just gonna stand here in silence if you don't have any questions for me, and it's gonna be super awkward, and everyone's gonna be unhappy. One of the lessons of StoryCorps, we've had, maybe 1,000, 1,500 facilitators who travel the country bearing witness to these interviews. And when they come off the road and you ask them what they've learned, every facilitator gives an answer that's a version of that Anne Frank quote that people are basically good. So another kind of lesson from StoryCorps, and you could say that there was a selection bias of some kind when there were hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of people who came to the booth. But we've had 700, 750,000, 800,000 people. So despite what we see on the news every day, despite what we read, you have to hold on to the fact and remember the basic goodness inside of us, inside of all of us, and not be afraid. So I'm happy to have you guys yell out questions, or you can come to the mic, or I can just play more stories if you want me to do that, but I'd rather have you ask questions. So Rick, Jennifer?
Yes, I'm down here now. I have a microphone here that I can bring to you. Geraldine Jordan is over there. She's Assistant Director of App State's Career Development Center, and yes, can either bring a mic to you or relay your question from the mic so that everyone can hear it.
What are some ways you can get people to start talking? How do you open that process?
That's a great question. Thank you. So I used to make radio documentaries, as I said, and I was pretty good at it. Yeah, and I was lucky. We're going to talk about callings in a little while. I was lucky that I found my calling when I was super young, right out of college, and I made these radio documentaries. And I thought that there was something special about the way that I did the interviews that made these beautiful radio documentaries. And then StoryCorps opened up, and all these regular people came to the booth, and they were exactly as good as I was at asking questions. It turned out I had very minimal talent, and we all have it. So, it's very easy to have people I think part of StoryCorps, the magic of what happens in this booth, and it's so simple. 2 people, a facilitator, 2 microphones. But looking at someone and asking them important questions, it reminds them that they matter and they won't be forgotten. So if you just lock in and you ask people about themselves, part of the problem that the country's do you guys agree the country is pretty unbelievably screwed up right now? Okay. Part of the problem in this country is that people feel like they don't matter. People feel like they're not being listened to. People feel they're just angry. And that act of just looking at someone and saying, who are you? How do you want to be remembered? Who were your parents? Who was kindest to you in your life? We can all do it. And you'd be amazed at how people they just open up. I think, part of what happens with StoryCorps also is that these all go to the Library of Congress. So again, on the mortality front, people are aware that they're speaking, that, your great-great-great-grandchildren are gonna listen to this thing. So they're aware they're speaking to the future. People bring their best angels to the booth. I think also the formality of having invited someone, causes really special things to happen. But I should say, we edit 1/400th of 1% of what happens in the booth into these little snippets, poems of who we are as Americans. We don't care. StoryCorps is all about having a good experience. I interviewed my dad many years ago, and it was just a normal interview. And a few years after that, he was diagnosed with cancer. He was still working, and he was dead 4 days later. And I'm an old dad. I had very young kids at the time, and at 3 a.m, I listened to that interview for the first time, and suddenly it became the most important and most interesting interview in the entire StoryCorps archive to me. Because, that's when the rubber hits the road, when you realize this is how your kids are going to meet this monumental figure in your life. So most of these interviews, we wouldn't find particularly interesting, but it doesn't matter. StoryCorps, nonprofit, as Jennifer said, public service. This is just about giving families a chance to connect with each other, and again, to to tell each other how much you mean to them, and to thank someone now without waiting by asking them the important questions in the booth. Do we have someone on the other side? Do we have more questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Oh, okay. Where are you?
Sorry.
Okay. Hey.
So, sorry, you answered my previous question while you're up there, but do you feel that in that first story with like Josh Lippman?
Yeah.
So, oh God, sorry, I'm completely blanking.
No, that's okay. Well, first of all, tell me what's your name?
Benjamin Welch.
Say again?
Ben.
Ben?
Yeah.
And are you a freshman? I can't. Okay.
Yeah, I'm a freshman here now.
Right.
Do you feel that, like, the fact? Oh, sorry. Now I remember my question. Do you feel of the kid interviewing the mom? Do you think there would have been like a significant difference in a lot of the messages if it would have been the mom interviewing the kid?
Well, I think it was a conversation, and she asked Josh a lot of questions, but I think it was incredibly meaningful to Sarah that Josh asked her to come to the booth. And I should say that after they did this interview, we do broadcasts on. Do people know what NPR is? On Morning Edition on NPR. Yay. Yes. We broadcast that on public radio, and Josh got hundreds and hundreds of emails telling him what an incredible young man he was. And he also, like, at the time, what was he, 12 at the time? He was getting, bullied and beat up a lot at school. So when he would come home, they would just sit down and open up this notebook and read through the letters, telling Josh what an amazing kid he is. So yeah, I think the dynamic would have been a little bit different, but the fact that it was surprising and Josh turned the tables on his mom, I think is part of what made it like really meaningful for the two of them. Thanks for the great question.
Right here.
Yeah.
So
First of all, tell me who you are.
I'm a transfer student. My name's Ruth.
Okay. Are you sure you're a sophomore?
I'm a junior.
Junior, okay.
And this is in particular relating to callings and all the stories you've collected about finding passion and purpose in your career. A lot of these stories, we see parents giving advice to children, mentors giving advice to proteges. What are some of the most recurring pieces of advice that you have seen over the years that people have given in the StoryCorps booth about finding purpose and passion in life?
So I think that it's obvious, but sometimes these the truths are kind of obvious. But I think that the advice that it's no different than what Rick and I were talking about in the car. That if you have to figure out, like, everybody's got something that they're meant to do, and you want to figure out what that is. And oftentimes, like, obviously, like, money, like, incredibly important, but it's that when you find that thing that you were born to do and you're able to put that out into the world, you're gonna, when you kind of breathe your last breath, you will have no regrets. So I think that is kind of the basic piece of advice that people have, which is find your calling, find what you're meant to do. Thanks for a great question. Welcome to App State.
We have another one over here.
More questions. Okay, good.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Percy. I'm a freshman here at App State.
Okay, hold on.
I'm right here. Hello. I'm curious about. I apologize if this is off topic.
No.
But with the first interview that was given, you used the term Asperger's, and are you aware of why that term was removed from the DSM-5?
I am, and I used the term because she uses it in the interview itself. Do you want to talk about that though a little bit?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So the term Asperger's was from a scientist who was revealed to be a Nazi scientist and was actually evaluating children on whether or not they should be killed based off of their, disabilities. And the reason why it's no longer in the DSM-5 is because of history behind it, and the reason why it is currently referred to as simply autism is that autism is understood as a spectrum and not levels or different types. It's simply a coagulation of different experiences. So you could meet one autistic individual that is the complete opposite of a different autistic individual, because there is no real central experience for autism.
Thank you so much for that. Are you a psych major?
Yes.
Okay.
I also have autism, so
Okay.
I apologize.
What did you think of Josh?
There were a few vocal quirks that I noticed of his that were validating in a sense, and it was also interesting to see that the idea of having being autistic and having a parent who had to adjust I understood that it was a common experience, but it was validating to see that it was mentioned and it was talked about, and that he had his mother not worried to acknowledge those things, because it can feel invalidating to have people say, oh no, I love you the exact same as I do your siblings, I this, that, or the other thing, so.
Well, thank you. That was very courageous of you to say all of those things. I really appreciate it, and thank you for coming tonight. Okay, how about one more question?
Time for one more?
Yeah, one more, and then we'll go do some more stories. This row is just on fire, you guys.
My name is Faith, and
Hi, Faith.
Hi. I was wondering, did you ever imagine the StoryCorps would ever get this big? And do you ever plan on expanding it more, like internationally, so we can hear more stories from other places?
So StoryCorps, I think of, Faith, it's a great question. I didn't know what would, like when StoryCorps started, it was an experiment. And it actually was only supposed to last for, this is like a little bit of Callings thing. It was only supposed to last for 10 years. Like, I was like, this is a 10-year thing. And about 6 months into it, I was having dinner with somebody, and they were like, why 10 years? And I was like, you're right. Like, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. Because, someone said to me a couple of weeks ago that, this is like playing in the sandbox of humanity. This is just about what it means to be human. I think, we've grown a lot. StoryCorps has grown a lot. But I think it's like we have so much work to do. I think we're just at the very, very, very beginning. I think of StoryCorps as kind of a hope machine. It's like a little bit of light cutting through the darkness, and everything that we're trying to do, reminding people of the basic goodness of our neighbors, of the importance of listening, like we're just getting started. So I hope someday the dream is that, StoryCorps will become part of the fabric of American life and be woven into the fabric of the lives of all Americans, that everyone will participate, that people listen to these stories. We are at I know football is big at App State like everywhere else. Like, we're at the 1-yard line. We're just getting started. So, and that's the thing about, with calling, is like, this is my calling. And, it's super amazing to be able to do your calling, but it's also incredibly hard. I was talking to, Rick was talking about like kind of traveling around. It's almost like running for office for 22 years without a break and never winning or losing, and it just will never end. But who cares, because I get to wake up every morning knowing that everything we do, every way we touch people at StoryCorps makes people's lives a little bit better. So we're gonna keep fighting with StoryCorps, and we'll see what happens. The trick, I guess another to your question about the most important advice on from folks inside the booth, beside, find that thing you're meant to do, the most important piece of advice, the most important thing of all, is never give up. You have to get up off the mat and you never give up. And I also, I'll just say in general, I have become, over the last 20 years, and I know the country is incredibly effed up right now, but I am so in love with this country and the people who live here. And I hope, all of you, don't give up on the country, don't give up on each other, and don't give up on your dreams. Okay, so callings. A couple of, one or two calling stories. It looks like a lot of you read it, which is fantastic. It's 53 short stories of everyday people across America, as you know from Jennifer, recorded through StoryCorps. As I said, there are no billionaires, there are no movie stars, there are no internet influencers. They're just regular people who found deep meaning in their work lives. There is, somebody asked me what my favorite stories are in the book. One of them is Sharon Long of Laramie, Wyoming. She was a mother of 4, working 3 jobs, 7 days a week, including working at Dairy Queen. When she was registering one of her kids for colleges, she said to the administrator who was signing up her kid, "I sure wish I could go here." And the woman in the admissions office said, "You can," and Sharon did. On her first day at school, she didn't know what the word anthropology meant. 4 years later, she earned a master's in forensic anthropology. In calling, she talked about what it's like for her reconstructing skulls for museums and law enforcement agencies, what it's like doing the work she was born to do. "It doesn't even seem like time goes by," she said. "You forget to eat, you forget to sleep, you forget to drink water. You're just in a state of suspended animation. It's perfect." And I wish that feeling for all of you one day. There's a guy named Leon Kogut, a Ukrainian immigrant barber, who actually is at my subway stop in Brooklyn, just by chance, who came to StoryCorps, that's where he cuts hair, to record an interview with his son Marat. Leon and his wife were dead set on Marat becoming a doctor or a lawyer, but Marat had other plans. He dreamed of being an NBA ref. In their StoryCorps interview, Leon, the barber, says to his son Marat, "I always remember when you asked me." So they're talking together, he's already an NBA referee, and the dad says to the son, "I remember when you asked me, how many lawyers do you have in this country, Dad?" And I said, "I don't know, maybe 3, 4 million? How many doctors do you have in this country?" I said, I don't know, 6, 7 million doctors? And then you said, "And how many NBA referees are in the country?" And I said, "I don't know." And you told me it's 60, Dad, and I'm going to be one of them. Since that moment, the dad says, I said to your mom, "That's it? Don't bother him anymore. He's going to be an NBA referee." And he is. And I wish that experience, that thrilling experience for each one of you of seeing your wildest dreams come true for every single one of you one day. I hope this book gets you thinking about what you were put on this earth to do, just as the advice from so many people in the booth. You might find your answer in your time here at App State. This is incredibly fertile ground to discover your calling. It might happen later. There are people in callings who don't find what they're meant to do until I think we have somebody in her 85, 86, 87 in callings. But until you find it, don't stop searching. Right, Jennifer? Yep. Keep your mind and your heart open. The answer is out there or in you somewhere. And once you find it, as I said, don't give up. Fight with everything you've got to do that thing. It is not easy. Nothing good is ever easy, but you'll never regret it. So I'm going to play a hard story can you guys handle a hard story? Are you sure? Okay. It's a hard story from callings. We just passed 9/11. This is John Vigiano, who came to StoryCorps with his wife. You're not going to see her in this animation, to remember his 2 sons who he lost on September 11th, 24 years ago. His son John, who was a police officer, and Joe, who was a firefighter. John was a firefighter. The father who's telling the story, and John's father was a firefighter. So this is called John and Joe, and yeah.
There was a couple of days each year you were allowed to take your children to work, and Joe loved it. That was his birthday present, that he would spend the night in the firehouse. We'd have a cake, and the guys I work with, they would take a milk container and they'd cut out the facsimile of a building, and they'd put it on the top of the cake, and then they would light it up. And they would tell Joe to put it out, and he would throw a pot of water on it. The birthday cake was a little soggy, but this is what he wanted. Joe started dating a young lady whose father was a police officer. And he come home one day and he says, I'm taking a police test. I says, Joe, you're only 17 years old. He says, no big deal. On the other side of the room, my son, John, wanted to be the next Donald Trump. He was going to make $1 million and take care of his mother and father. But in 1984, I came down with throat cancer. He noticed then how my unit took care of us. And he says, I'm going to become a fireman. I says, you're kidding me. Firemen don't make millions of dollars. How am I going to live like a king? But I was very happy, very proud. My father had been on the fire department, and he was the first one to be issued badge number 3436. And they reissued it to my son, John. So the badge was only used by 2. Both the boys would call me when they were working. John would always call around 3:30, 4 o'clock. And that particular night, September 10th, we spoke for a few minutes, and I says, I love you. And he says, I love you. Joe called me in the morning and told me to turn on the television that a plane just hit the Trade Center. He says, I'm heading south on West Street. This is a big one. And I just said, be careful, I love you. He said, I love you too. That was it. We had the boys for John for 36 years, Joe for 34 years, ironically. Badge number 3436. I don't have any could've, should've, or would'ves. I wouldn't have changed anything. There's not many people that the last words they said to their son or daughter was, I love you. And the last words they heard was, I love you. So that makes me sleep at night.
Again, the wisdom in these stories, you know, after you hear that story, for those of you who have kids, will have kids, you're going to say, I love you is the last thing you say to them for the rest of your life. I know I know that that's been true of me since I heard this story. I'm going to play a story that has nothing to do with callings, just because it's a little bit of a relief, and it speaks to some of the unexpected things that can happen in the booth. I'd be curious if, like, the freshmen here, if this makes any sense to them or they like this. I think people who are a little bit older will find this of interest. It's about a newfangled contraption that this woman, Betty Jenkins, who is 94 years old when she comes to the booth, received from her mother 75 years ago, an inflatable bra. Now, this is going to make absolutely no sense to younger people here, but other people it may, sound familiar. So Betty Jenkins on the inflatable bra she got nearly 100 years ago.
I was very skinny, and I didn't have any curves. I guess my mother got kind of worried because she didn't think I had enough boyfriends. So she bought me a bra that you blow up. I was real excited, so I blew and blew to about 32. I was quite happy with the looks. I got a few wolf whistles. Of course, at that age, you're very self-conscious. That year, I took a trip to South America. I proceeded to fly to Santiago. Soon we were into the Andes Mountains, and it turned out that it was a non-pressurized plane, and I felt very uncomfortable. Things were getting very tight. This bra had started to increase in size. As the thing got bigger, I tried to stand up and I couldn't see my feet. The directions said it would go to 48 if I wanted to. I thought, what will happen if it goes beyond 48? And I found out what happened. It blew out. It was a loud, resounding sound, And the co-pilot came into the cabin with the gun, wondering what had happened. The men all pointed to me. Well, it's difficult to explain to people in English that part of your anatomy just blew up. But to try and do it in Spanish, it's beyond hope. So they made a landing. I was taken off the plane and turned over to 2 women police, and they told me to strip, hunting for what they thought was the bomb. When I stripped down, I showed them the hole in the bra, and they chuckled. And I thought, oh my, they've gotten the point. And I was allowed back on the plane. A month later, I got a bill from the airline for $400 for an unscheduled stop.
Inflatable bras. I'm going to talk. We're almost out of time, and I'll take a couple more questions. I want to talk about something and play a story on a project that an effort from StoryCorps that's relatively new. You know, all of the 750,000 people who have participated in StoryCorps to date until recently have known and loved each other, and I've been hinting at this a little bit, but you know, in terms of the concerns around in the country, you know, I became pretty concerned about toxic polarization in the country about 8-9 years ago. Not the fact that we argue with each other as Americans, but what happens when we can't see each other as human beings anymore, which is extremely dangerous. And obviously, it seems like we're reaching a tipping point when it comes to that sort of what's called affective polarization. And, you know, we know from history that when we can't see each other as human beings, things don't end well. So we started experimenting with putting strangers together for the first time across the political divide, not to talk about politics, but just to get to know each other as human beings under the truth that it's the premise. Brene Brown uses this phrase that it's hard to hate up close. So, you know, our Hippocratic oath, you know, what like the oath doctors take to do no harm is that we do no harm at StoryCorps. So we spent years testing this methodology, putting people together, and then launched a few years ago, launched nationally about a year ago. And the dream, which also seems completely insane, is to convince the country that it's our patriotic duty to see the humanity in people with whom we disagree. But the intervention is unbelievably powerful and a beautiful thing to see, very surprising, very kind of uplifting to see what happens when people have the courage to sit down with someone who they disagree with and ask those questions that we've been talking about. This is not a One Small Step story, but this is one of the stories that inspired One Small Step. It takes place at UT in Austin. And this is actually, it's not a One Small Step story because One Small Step are strangers who've never met before. This StoryCorps interview is the second time these two people met. It's Amina Amdeen, who was a student at UT Austin, and Joe Weidnecht. Amina was at an anti-Trump rally, and Joe showed up in a Make America Great Again hat. And they tell the story of what happened on that day.
I noticed you with the hat. Mm-hmm. And I noticed that you were surrounded by some people, and I noticed that they were being kind of threatening, and then somebody snatched your hat off your head. And that's the point where something kind of snapped inside me because I wear a Muslim hijab, and I've been in situations where people have tried to snatch it off my head.
Wow.
And I rushed towards you, and I just started screaming, "Leave him alone, give me that back."
I don't think we could be any further apart as people, and yet it was just kind of like this common, that's not okay moment. You are genuinely the only Muslim person I know. It's not that I've actively avoided, it's just, I've just never been in the position where I can interact for an extended period of time. So I guess my views on the Muslim community have been influenced by a lot of the news articles and things of that nature.
I feel like a lot of times in the media, you don't see the normal Muslim, the one that listens to classic rock like I do. You don't meet that Muslim.
Can you tell me about where you grew up? What was that part of your life like?
So I was born in Baghdad, in Iraq. I moved to the US when I was 10 years old.
Okay.
Being a Muslim girl, I stood out in almost every single way that you can in middle school, the worst time to stand out. What about you? How was it like when you grew up?
I was homeschooled,
Mm-hmm.
so it was a vastly different experience. Socially, I didn't have, I guess, as many friends as most people would. I only went to public school 1 year of my life, and I got in 3 fights, and I lost all of them. I actually lost a lot of friends because of this election, because of my political stance. So I hope that I can be the reason that someone decides to talk to someone as opposed to just cutting them out of their life or blocking them on Twitter,
Yeah. I'd like for this to encourage other people to engage in more conversations with people that you don't agree with.
That's what it's all about. I'm so glad I wasn't the only one who felt like that.
So maybe someday, we've started opening One Small Step programs on campuses, and maybe someday we'll come to App State as well. It would be, I don't know, do you guys hate this idea? You ready to kill me? Okay. Questions about StoryCorps, about One Small Step, and then I'll do a little closing and maybe play one more story if we have time, if you let me. And then happy to sign a few books. And yes, you want to just yell your question? Or, oh, okay, no, you know what, I'm not going to direct this. You guys, whoever, go ahead.
Go ahead,
Hello,
Joe.
my name's Aiden. I'm a freshman here
Hey,
at App State.
How you doing?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
Good.
So the question I have for you, is there any particular question that you wish people would ask more often when they're doing their interviews for StoryCorps?
You know, that's a great question, and I've been asked, like many, I've done a lot of speeches, no one's ever asked me that question before. So I know, because people tend to ask the most popular questions, which are the best questions, but I think that piece of advice from the facilitators that I mentioned before is the most important piece of advice, which is like, ask that question that you've always wanted to ask. That's the most important question for you to ask. But I love like who's been kindest to you in your life? Like those obvious questions are it's just such a great thing to have a chance to talk about that and reflect on that. How do you want to be remembered is a great question. And that's a great question from you, so thank you.
Right here.
Yes.
Yep. My life path has shown me what your facilitators said when they came back, that people are basically good. Everything you're talking about here today, and all the people in this room and the young people who have asked questions, are the reason I wrote a book and founded an organization called Citizens Congress. And the idea behind Citizens Congress is to pass a constitutional amendment that would replace the House of Representatives with twice as many members, chosen by lottery. And furthermore, and that's because, like you, I believe people are basically good. I would trade this room for Congress right now in a heartbeat. Okay. The amendment would also make the minimum age for serving in Congress 18 years old because of these kids in this room. So thank you. I'll take a cue from hospice and say, thank you. I love you for what you're doing, and you need no forgiving.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and I agree. I do a lot of freshman read talks, and a lot of times early in the year especially, freshmen are kind of scared to say anything, and I'm incredibly impressed at your courage speaking today, and I'm grateful for you guys being here. I see people are leaving, so I like to leave people wanting more. I'm just going to say a couple more words and then let you guys go. I won't play any more stories, but a few lines to leave you with. One is Mr. Rogers used to carry around in his wallet a quote from a nun in Philadelphia named Mary Lou Kanacki, and it said, "It's impossible not to love someone whose story you've heard." The last line of Callings, and hopefully this is not a spoiler for those of you who are still in the middle of it. Jennifer was asking what my favorite story was in the book, and I think it's this last story. It's a 93-year-old grandpa, a contractor, talking to his granddaughter about his life and his life's work. And at the end of the interview, his granddaughter asks if he has any advice for her. And his answer are the last 3 words in the book, which are live with courage. So live with courage, live with your hands unfolded, as Mr. Sykes says in Mississippi. May you find your calling. May you do what you love to do. That's my wish for you. So thank you so much for coming tonight. Congratulations to the incoming class of App State. Go get them, class of 2029. Thanks to the people of Boone. Thank you so much for having me tonight. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Rick. Thank you so much.